So after a strong close on this Friday, the big question is, do we see some type of bear market rally back into the declining 21 EMA, 50 SMA, or even the 200 SMA on the Nasdaq Composite all the way up here? We don't know for sure. We don't have crystal balls. And the really important thing is we don't have to know what's going to happen to profit from any type of rally. All we have to do is manage our risk, look for setups, look for stocks that are kind of bucking the overall trend. And in this video, we'll run through a list of about 30 names that are on my radar for next week that I'm really watching very closely for potential signs of either accumulation or just as an overall gauge of the health of the market. And overall in this video, we'll run through the market indexes, leading stocks, a few different sources of sentiment, the IBD Big Picture article, and finally the wishing well GMI signal. And if you do enjoy my analysis at any time, please go ahead and leave me a like down below. It helps me out and my channel. And of course, subscribe if you want to see more videos just like this one every single week. With that said, after you've gently tapped that like button, let's dive right in and talk about the Nasdaq Composite. Overall, we saw a potential fall through day right here, which ultimately failed pretty much the very next day as we've undercut this rally day one here on this Friday. But really, this rally attempt was dead on that distribution day, the very next day after that fall through day. It's still been extremely volatile. Everything's very choppy, and it's very hard to manage risk in this environment. Overall, we're still below a declining 21 as well as 50 SMA here, and also below declining 200 SMA here, as we're just kind of continuing to chop around within this correction. And all the trends on pretty much all the different time frames are to the downside here, except for the very short term, because we did have a pretty strong close on this Friday. But even more important than kind of this close on the Nasdaq Composite is kind of how the leadership stocks are shaping up, and we'll get into that later on in the video. With that said, let's move on over to the S&P 500 and take a look at that chart as well. Very similar action, and maybe it was even a little bit stronger on this Friday as we closed green on the day. But once again, we did get an undercut of this key level, and we're still below declining 21, 50, and 200 SMA as we continue to chop around within this correction. Looking at the small caps here, the IWM, the Russell 2000, you can see that we're actually forming a potential higher low here, so a little bit of stronger action versus the Nasdaq Composite or S&P 500, but we're still below declining 21, 50, and 200 SMA. So still a lot of work to do here, and we've got a ton of overhead supply to work through if we do rally back into this area. And I'll be watching this level pretty carefully, as well as the declining 21 and also the 50 SMA. And along with the 21 EMA, we've got it pretty much lining up with this level, this prior point of resistance. And also taking a look at the Russell 2000 Growth Index, you can see, like the IWM in general, we're potentially forming a higher low here as we didn't undercut this level, but we still got a lot of work to do before we restart an uptrend above a rising 21, 50, and 200 SMA, all of which right now are currently declining and above price. So definitely a spot to watch right here to see if we can finally break through that point, get back above that 21 EMA, and that could be the start of a tradable rally. Lastly, taking a look at the FFTY, the Innovator IBD 50 ETF. Once again, this formed a little bit of a higher low here, but this is a pretty weak index here, and we're below declining 21, 50, and 200 SMA, so stage 4 as well in this index. So overall, that's pretty much it for the market indexes. Let me know your thoughts down below on these averages. And I know a lot of people are watching the S&P 500 last week looking for that official bear market status. For me, we've almost been in a bear market since the start of this year, as we saw the major kind of market leaders break down, break moving averages, break base lows, all of that. And that's where it really gives you an edge to watch those market leaders, those individual stocks, because often they give you a tell before the overall market indexes. And if you're kind of a can-slim trader, you've been watching those stocks pretty closely, you know that conditions haven't been right for quite some time now, and we've pretty much been in a bear market since the start of this year. So let me know your thoughts down below on that. And now let's go ahead and run through a bunch of different stocks. And first things first, let's run through kind of the FANG type names. I've got a full list here to go through, but we'll start with these. Tesla, pretty weak action here. Not a great close here on this Friday. Weaker than the overall market indexes, still below declining 21, 50, and 200 SMA. And you can see that these are just starting to curl down here, and that wouldn't be a great look for Tesla. But we have now undercut this key level, so we'll see if we can kind of get some response here. But this stock is just in a downtrend and needs a lot of work to basically restart a potential uptrend. Moving on to Amazon, let's take a look at that chart. You've got this gap down here. We're below declining 21, 50, and 200 SMA, stage 4 decline. Potential higher low here, but still just an overall downtrend. Taking a look at Apple, this is holding up a little bit better, but looks pretty much just like the S&P 500. We had a big reversal here, closed green, so that's good. And we've pretty much undercut this key level, so we'll see if we get a response here. But we're just in a downtrend below, declining 21, 50, and looks like a flatlining 200 SMA. Moving on to Netflix, this has been pretty weak here, 2 gap downs on huge volume, and just kind of chopping sideways here. Not really a focused name for me. Lastly, in terms of the FANG names, we've got Google. Let's take a look at that chart here, just in a downtrend below, declining 21, 50, and 200 SMA. Yeah, nothing much more to say here. Decent close on Friday, but still has a lot of work to do to get back above a rising 21 EMA. And before we actually move on to the names I want to cover individually, which we'll get to in just a second, I did want to go over to TC2000 and show some of the indicators I'm watching overall in terms of market breadth, as well as the overall trend. So first things first, looking at the Nasdaq Composite and bringing up kind of the percentage from that 10-week, we are at kind of minus 10%, which in terms of intermediate corrections is a potential reversal point. So we'll have to see what happens there. But you can see that kind of the more extensive bear markets corrections, we can go a lot lower than that 10% as we see acceleration to the downside. So be aware of that. Not a sign to just jump all in, but something to be aware of. And moving on over to the 21 EMA, kind of on a shorter term basis, we're once again kind of at that level where we do see potential reversals. And we got pretty extended to the downside from that moving average on this day right here. We got down to minus 9.33%. And then we saw that reversal. And now we're potentially forming a higher low on this indicator. Also going over to just kind of a trend tool. People seem to like this last time. The GMMA chart, the Guppy multiple moving averages chart here. It's a really great way to kind of represent the overall trend very visually. If we're in a red, white, blue uptrend, we're in a nice environment for stock trading for the most part. And when basically the blue is above white space, above the red, we're in a downtrend on whatever time frame you're kind of looking at. Looking at the daily, we're in a red, white, blue downtrend, or actually a blue, white, red downtrend. And going over to a weekly as well, we're also in a longer term downtrend. And even going over to a shorter term time frame, the 65-minute chart, we're still in a downtrend. And this is really useful, especially for my time frame, swing trading, to kind of stay with this overall trend. You can see how it caught the March rally here. If you're looking to go long, wait for this to develop a red, white, blue uptrend, and your bias can be to the short side if we're in a blue, white, red downtrend, as you can see on the 65-minute chart. So still a lot of work to do before we restart even a short-term rally. So don't get sucked in by these individual days where we see pops of 3% after the previous day, losing 5%. Be late to that rally. Basically wait for that trend to confirm. Also, I wanted to take a look at the kind of T2 indicators here. Let's go over to a clean chart here and let's minimize this here. This is the McClellan oscillator, just kind of in no man's land here. This is kind of oversold, overbought, but be careful with those terms. And going over to the T2 107, this is the percentage of NYSE stocks above their 200-day moving averages. And we're kind of at that level where we potentially see some reversals, although going back once again to 2008 and those kind of major corrections, we can see it get a lot lower than this. Also looking at the T2 108, the kind of 10% mark here is kind of what we're looking for. And the T2 108 is the percentage of stocks above their 40-day moving averages. So once again, kind of a breadth indication. And looking back in history, once we undercut that kind of 10% level, and especially under that 5% level on this indicator, maybe it's a time to start accumulating a little bit of a market index like the QQQ and kind of play that market breadth reversion trade. But don't go all in, kind of piece in to things and wait for that market to kind of confirm that you are right. So that's a few kind of indicators that I want to go through. In terms of breadth, we could still go a lot lower, but we are seeing some potential signs that we're near a potential tradable rally. But once again, the kind of market leaders and the overall indexes have to kind of confirm that before you really want to put money to the test. So with that, let's jump right in to the list of stocks I'm watching as of this moment. All right, so looking at these names, first up, we've got some semi names. And although this is definitely in a downtrend below declining 50 SMA, we had constructive action here as we formed a higher low, a sign of relative strength as the market formed a lower low. And we'll have to see whether the stock continues to kind of show some relative strength here, as you can see from the RS line, and potentially start a move up to that 200 SMA. And if you're a shorter term trader, like a day trader or even a swing trader, this is a great vehicle to be focused on, as it's showing relative strength and is extremely liquid as well. Moving on, we've got ON, another name within that kind of overall sector. Once again, not really a leading group just yet, ranked 112 out of 197, but you can see it's kind of going sideways as the overall market is declining, and that has led to outperformance in terms of relative strength, and its overall RS rating is a pretty strong 92, as it's kind of basically consolidating right near that 200-day moving average. So I'm watching for some fall through off this constructive action on Friday and a potential break through this area right below 80. GFS, another name within this group that's been showing some relative strength lately, as it's potentially forming a higher low here, and you can watch this area right below that kind of 50 SMA right here, although we do see decent overhead supply in this recent IPO. Moving on, we've got SITM, another name kind of within that overall sector, and overall is stuck below that 50 SMA, but kind of coiling up here and potentially forming a higher low once again, right below 200, and we'll see if we can pop through this area, and this is a potential consolidation pivot, but very early off the bottom of this base. Next up, we've got AOSL within the same group, definitely a little bit weaker than the other names. We've got these kind of gap downs, but we're potentially forming a higher low here, and we'll see if we can kind of build above that 21 EMA and get back above that 200 SMA as well. Moving on, we've got MPWR, another name within this group, and once again, just kind of chopping sideways, not doing much of anything, but it is showing subtle relative strength, as you can see from that relative strength line. Moving on, we've got one of the leadership groups as of this moment. We've got Arch Resources, which is in the energy coal group, ranked 1 out of 197. Very strong action, strong trend above a rising 21 and 50 SMA, and we're potentially pausing here. A lot of kind of tails here as it's been knocked down, but overall is holding in there, and you could watch for a breakout through these levels. AMR as well, coiling, and I like the setup. It's a little bit tighter than Arch overall. You could watch for a kind of fall through 2-2 reversal through this high, right at that 150 level. And once again, we're in a super strong prior uptrend above a rising 21, 50, and 200 SMA. Moving on, we've got EQT, another name to watch within this kind of overall cyclical sector. We've got this from the oil and gas integrated group, also a leading group as of this moment. Very strong chart, basically a double from this base breakout. And now we've got a potential double bottom forming as it undercut and reclaimed here. And it's coiling a little bit. We've got a potential early entry here and a consolidation pivot at this level as well. I'd love to see maybe an inside day and then a breakout to manage risk even a little bit tighter, as well as a dry up on a potential inside day like that. But great numbers here and really strong estimates going into next year as well as this year. Next up, we've got CVX, Chevron. This kind of shows you just how overall XLE is doing, and it's holding up here along with USO. Yeah, it's just forming a stage 2 base here, and we'll see if this can fall through to the upside and continue its kind of run of outperformance. Moving on, we've got SQM, which is in the chemicals agricultural group, also a leading group as of this moment. Strong action breaking out of this base late last week, kind of straight off the bottom. So if we get some consolidation, could be a potential swing trade for those of you who basically want to be involved in this market as of this moment. And yeah, definitely a name to have on your radar, and very strong numbers as well as estimates for this year and the next. Moving on, we've got MRK, and overall the kind of big pharma companies have been showing outperformance. Look at that relative strength line just shooting off the bottom here as it continues to basically make new 52-week highs, if not all-time highs here. And we're just in a nice trend above a rising 21, 50, and 200 SMA. LOY, another name kind of in the same group and area, and you can see it hasn't broken out just yet. We're kind of coiling here against the 50 SMA, and once again, we're seeing relative strength outperformance and relative strength breaking out before price in this potential leader in an overall group that is acting and hanging in there pretty darn well. Moving on, we've also got Vertex, a little bit weaker than the other two, but also a name to watch in this area. And we've also got REGN as well as Halo within that overall same space. Halo, you've got this big base and potential resistance right at this area, as well as right here as it goes straight off the bottom. So I'd love to see kind of an inside day consolidation, let that 21 EMA catch up a little bit and kind of curl up under price. And then we maybe see a breakout through these levels. Moving on, we've got some shippers. We've got GOGL. These have been super strong and have been a leading group. This one is acting great. You can see the volume on this breakout inside day on Friday and overall strong push from this base as we trend above a rising 21, 50, and 200 SMA. Relative strength line is screaming at you. This is definitely a strong stock, and overall, just acting great. Great numbers down here as well. We've got Grin also, maybe a little bit weaker, but just starting to break out here. We'll see if this can push through off the bottom here. And we've also got SBLK in a similar spot. And we've also got Zim here, which is a little bit lower than its base, but has been a name that's been performing extremely well. So those are the shippers. Moving on to some kind of chemicals and material stocks, we've got LTHM, which is a lithium company forming out a base here. We've got a consolidation pivot right at this spot here. It is a little bit straight off the bottom, so I'd love to see some tightness, some inside days on declining volume before we get that push through towards that 30 mark, but definitely a name to have on your radar. I like this big burst in volume, and it's held up extremely well above its moving averages considering what the overall market is doing as of this moment. Another name to watch in this area is SLCA, which isn't acting extremely well here, but considering the overall market is holding up better than most, and we had a super strong push here. So if we can form out a base and start kind of moving up the right-hand side here, definitely a name to have on your radar because you can see that relative strength score of 98 out of 100. Within the same area, we've got KRO, which caught my eye here on this huge move on volume. And then we had a little bit of a downside reversal here, but considering what the market was doing, not too bad here, especially considering the action in the previous day. And we'll see if this can kind of form out some type of tradable pattern after the strong push on volume. Moving on, we've got OLN also acting pretty strong right near the top of its base, as well as ALB, which similar to LTHM is right near a tradable spot here, as well as under potential resistance right below 250. Moving on, we've got some beverage companies, MNST, just forming out a big base here. Relative strength is super strong, as well as we've got CELH, which is pushing off lows here, and we'll see if we can push through this area. I think if you draw an anchor VWAP from these highs, it also lines up pretty much with these peaks. So definitely an important level of interest, and we'll see if we can kind of build out a right-hand side to this pretty large base and start a potential uptrend here, forming higher lows and higher highs. Moving on, we've got some just kind of sporadic names here, just kind of not really any group theme, but we've got RCMT acting super strong above a rising 21, 50, and 200 SMA. We've also got PRCT, a recent IPO to watch. I like the overall pattern, and we'll see if we can kind of build out here within this area as it's kind of approaching its IPO close here, and that's been resistance, that overall area, as it forms a base right below that 40 mark. Lastly, we've got LNTH. This has been super strong and just bucking the overall trend clearly, as you can see from that relative strength line. So that's pretty much the list I want to run through. Let me know your thoughts on these setups. And this is just kind of an overall watch list to keep an eye on the overall health and breadth of the market as we potentially see kind of group themes emerge if we do see a tradable rally coming out of this spot. So let me know your thoughts on these setups. And if I missed any names that you're watching, let me know down below in the comment section as well. Moving on to sentiment, let's start with my Twitter surveys. And overall, we saw a decline from 43% bullish to 39% bullish, still relatively high considering the overall market conditions, but that's pretty much what the results say. Looking at the name exposure index, we saw a big flush, which is great, down to pretty much 20 here, down to 19.51 it looks like, so that's great. Definitely seeing some fear come into this metric. And looking at the bulls versus bears poll, we're continuing to see a divergence here as the bears cross over the bulls. Once again, fear is finally coming into the market. And looking at the put call ratio, this is hanging out definitely higher than it has been, but still we're not seeing that big flush to that 1.15 level, which I love to see. So overall, definitely some fear coming into these metrics, but still room to go as well. Looking at the IBD Big Picture article, they talk about the action late on Friday in the overall indexes. They discuss also the fall through day, which failed here. And overall, their current view is once again a market correction. And you've got some layers up in volume and down in volume as well. Lastly, we've got the wishing well GMI signal, which is still currently red since April 12th. And overall, Dr. Wish reminds us that we're currently in a stage 4 decline on the major indexes, the QQQ, the major index ETFs. So overall, my current view, like IBD, is a market in correction, but we could be seeing some potential for a tradable rally if you're a short-term trader and are able to capitalize on those type of opportunities. But if you're more of a position trader, there's no harm in being 100% in cash. During a bear market correction, that's often the best place to be. But overall, that's pretty much it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, go ahead and leave a like down below and subscribe if you're new to the channel. And I'll see you guys in future videos. Thanks.